Right now, out in your garden, your hydrangea is doing something quiet, something you cannot see. It is making a decision. And what you do this August decides whether it erupts with blooms next June or hands you nothing but a wall of green leaves. Here is the truth almost nobody says out loud. Your hydrangea is setting next year's flowers right now, in the heat of late summer, on wood that already exists. So if you cut it wrong, feed it wrong, or water it wrong this 1 month, you can erase an entire season of color before the first frost ever arrives. I learned that the hard way. Years ago, I went out one hot August evening and neatly tidied up my big blue mop head by the porch, snipping it into a tidy dome because it looked messy. The next June, I got the healthiest, greenest, most flowerless plant you have ever seen. Not one bloom, and I finally understood what I had done. So stay with me, because at the very end, I am going to share one overlooked step, kept alive by old cottage gardeners and backed by the work of the man who bred the reblooming hydrangeas we all grow that protects next year's flowers through the winter. It costs nothing. It takes 5 minutes, and almost everyone does the opposite. And before you think this is only for brand new plants, let me stop you. This is for the hydrangea you have babied for 10 years, the one your mother gave you, the established, woody, stubborn one that used to bloom and lately just will not, especially that one. Let me start with the mistake I made myself, because it is the most common one, and it is the most heartbreaking, and it happens in August without anyone realizing. You look at your hydrangea in late summer. The flowers have faded, some leaves look tired, the whole thing sprawls a little. And every instinct you have as a tidy gardener says, cut it back, clean it up, get it ready. So you reach for the pruners. That single moment, repeated in millions of gardens every August, is why so many hydrangeas never bloom. Here is what you have to understand about the most common hydrangea in our yards. The big leaf hydrangea, the mophead and lacecap types with the big round blue and pink heads. This plant blooms on old wood. That is the phrase you need burned into your memory, old wood. It means the stems that grew this year are the stems that will carry flowers next year. And starting in late summer, right around August, those stems begin forming next year's flower buds down inside the tips. You cannot see them. They are microscopic little bundles tucked into the stem, forming quietly through August, September, and into fall. But they are there. And when you shear the plant into a neat ball in August, you are slicing off every single one of those baby flower buds and throwing them in the compost. The plant survives. It grows back, leaves, but the flowers are gone because you removed them before they ever had a chance. The horticulture team at the University of Georgia, where the famous plantsman Dr. Michael Deere spent decades studying these very shrubs, puts it plainly. Big leaf hydrangeas set their buds the summer before they bloom. So pruning in late summer, fall, or winter removes the coming year's flowers. That is not opinion. That is the biology of the plant. So here is what to do instead. And it is almost nothing. In August, leave the structure of the plant alone. Do not shear it. Do not shape it. If a stem is truly dead, brown and brittle, and snapping like a dry twig, you can remove that. If you want to take off a spent flower head, you may, but only the flower itself, cutting just below the old bloom and no deeper. Think of it as removing the hat, not the head. Every inch of stem you leave standing is an inch that can carry a flower. The relief in that is real. It means the answer for most of you is to put the pruners down and walk away. But there is a catch, and this is where it gets more serious. Because pruning is not the only way August quietly steals your blooms. The next one is something you are probably doing right now out of pure kindness. You are trying to help your plant, and you are hurting it without knowing. It is hot. Your hydrangea looks stressed in the afternoon. The leaves go limp and droop. The flowers flop, and the whole plant looks like it is begging for water. So what do? You grab the hose in the middle of the day and give it a good drink. Right there in the blazing afternoon sun, splashing water over the leaves and the crown. It feels like rescue. It is often the opposite. Here is the thing about that afternoon wilt. A hydrangea will droop in intense afternoon heat even when the soil underneath is perfectly moist. The plant is losing water through its huge leaves faster than the roots can pull it up, so it wilts on purpose to protect itself. It is not necessarily thirsty. It is just hot. And if you run out every afternoon and soak it in response, You can slowly drown the roots and invite root rot, which is far harder to fix than a little midday flop. The trick is timing and depth. I check the soil, not the leaves. I push my finger 2 to 3 inches down into the ground near the base. If it is damp down there, I do nothing, no matter how sad the leaves look at 3 in the afternoon. If it is dry 2 knuckles down, then it truly needs water. And when it does need water, I water in the early morning, and I water deep and slow, right at the base of the plant, letting it soak into the root zone rather than spraying the leaves. A hydrangea generally wants about 1 inch of water a week, more in a heat wave, but delivered in 1 or 2 deep soakings, not little daily sprinkles. Deep watering pulls the roots down where the soil stays cool and moist. Shallow daily sprinkling keeps the roots up near the hot surface where they cook. The extension horticulturists in the American South, where these plants take a real beating in summer, say the same thing again and again. Water deeply in the morning, keep it off the foliage to prevent disease, and let the top inch dry slightly between soakings. Morning watering gives the leaves all day to dry, which starves off the powdery mildew and leaf spot that love a wet, humid evening. So you have stopped the afternoon panic watering, and your roots are safer for it. But watering is only half of keeping those roots cool and steady through August. Because underneath everything, there is a layer most people either forget entirely or get completely wrong, and it makes the difference between a plant that sails through the heat and one that limps. Let me tell you about the blanket over the roots, because this is the quiet hero of an August garden. I want you to picture the ground around your hydrangea right now. Is it bare soil, cracked and pale and baking in the sun? Because if it is, your plant is fighting a battle it should not have to fight. Hydrangea roots are shallow and thirsty, and they hate heat. In August, that bare soil around the base can climb to temperatures that stress the roots badly, drying them out within hours of every watering and leaving the plant gasping. The fix is mulch, and it is so simple that people dismiss it. A layer of organic mulch, 2 to 3 inches deep, spread in a wide ring around the plant, does 3 things at once. It keeps the soil cool. It holds moisture so your deep morning watering lasts far longer. And it slowly feeds the soil as it breaks down. I use shredded bark, leaf mold, or well-rotted compost. And I spread it out to match the spread of the branches, because that is where the feeding roots reach. But here is the one detail people get wrong, and it matters. Do not pile the mulch up against the stems like a little volcano around the trunk. That traps moisture against the woody base and invites rot and disease right where the plant is most vulnerable. Leave a gap of a couple of inches of bare soil right around the crown, then spread your mulch ring outward from there. Cool roots, dry crown. That is the balance. The Royal Horticultural Society in Britain recommends mulching hydrangeas with organic matter to conserve moisture and keep those shallow roots cool through the growing season. And once you feel how much steadier a mulched plant is in a heat wave, you will never leave the soil bare again. The wilting eases. The soil stays dark and damp under your finger. The plant stops living on the edge. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable, because there is a mistake that feels generous and responsible, a mistake made by the most loving gardeners of all, and it can do damage that does not show up until winter has already killed the plant back. I am talking about feeding, and I need you to really hear this part. Your hydrangea looks a little tired in August. The leaves are not as lush as they were in June. So you think, it needs a boost. It needs feeding. I will give it a nice dose of fertilizer to perk it up before fall. It is such a caring instinct. And in August, it can be one of the most damaging things you do. Here is why. When you feed a hydrangea in late summer, especially anything high in nitrogen, you tell the plant to push out a flush of soft, tender, new growth. New shoots, new leaves, all fresh and green and full of water. But it is August, autumn is coming. And that soft new growth has no time to harden off, no time to toughen up and prepare for cold before the first frost arrives. So when the temperature drops, that tender growth gets slammed, it blackens and dies, and the shock can run right down into the stems that were carrying next year's precious flower buds. You wanted to help the plant into fall. Instead, you handed it fragile new growth right before the season that punishes fragility. The rule I follow, and the one you will hear from university extension programs across the country, is to stop feeding big leaf hydrangeas by midsummer. In most gardens, that means the last feeding happens in late spring or very early summer, and after that, nothing. No fertilizer in August, no fertilizer in fall. Let the plant slow down, ripen its wood, and settle its buds in for the cold. A hydrangea heading into autumn should be winding down, not revving up. If your plant genuinely looks hungry, pale, and weak, the gentler answer is that mulch and compost we just talked about. Compost feeds slowly and gently as it breaks down. It will never force the sudden tender surge that a bag of quick fertilizer does. So you nourish the soil without whipping the plant into risky late growth. Put the fertilizer away until spring. That single act of restraint protects more blooms than any feeding ever could. Right now, go check your own hydrangea bed and see if you're tempted to reach for that fertilizer bag anyway, because I promise you that same temptation shows up every single August in every single garden, year after year, on every plant you own, not just this one. That's exactly why I put together the complete plant rescue collection, so you're never guessing again with any sick, thirsty, or confused plant in your yard. Inside, you get the 5-minute diagnostic framework that reads any sick plant, so you can finally tell thirst from overwatering instead of second-guessing yourself the way I did with my own mop head years ago. You also get yellowing leaves, decoded clue by clue, and browning edges versus tips versus center broken into 3 distinct answers. Because those are 3 completely different problems that most gardeners lump into one panicked guess. And since we just talked about wood and timing, the collection also hands you 1 seasonal map for every cut you'll ever make, plus the narrow peony window and the hosta decisions most gardeners miss completely. Here's something you can check tonight for free. No purchase needed. Go feel the soil around any struggling plant you own 2 to 3 inches down, the same way I showed you with the hydrangea, and you'll already start seeing which of your plants are thirsty and which are just hot and dramatic. The fastest way to get the books is to scan the QR code right there on your screen or go to the link in the description or the pinned comment. Fall cleanup season is coming for every plant in your yard, not just hydrangeas, so the sooner you can read the signals, the fewer you'll lose before winter. Now, let's get back to the plant in front of us, because there's a whole category of gardener I haven't spoken to yet, and I want to make sure you're not left out. Now, up to this point, I have been talking mostly about protecting a plant that is more or less healthy, but I know some of you are looking at your hydrangea right now, and it is not just tired, it is struggling. It is old and woody and leggy, it barely bloomed this year, and part of you wonders if it is simply past its prime and should come out. This next part is for you specifically, and I want you to lean in because you do not have to start over. I have brought plants back from exactly that place. A hydrangea that looks like a tangle of bare woody stems with a few sad leaves at the tips is very often not dying. It is neglected, and neglect is fixable, even in August, if you do it gently instead of drastically. The temptation with an old struggling plant is to cut it hard to the ground and force a fresh start. But we already know that in August that hard cut removes next year's buds, so you would be trading one lost year for another. Instead, here is the rescue I use in late summer for an established plant that has lost its way. First, I clear the ground around it completely, pulling every weed and any grass that has crept in, because that competition steals water and nutrients from those shallow hydrangea roots. Then I water it deeply and slowly, a long soak right at the base, to rehydrate roots that have probably been running dry for a long time. Then I lay down that cool, moist blanket of compost and mulch we talked about, 2 to 3 inches wide with the gap around the crown. Just clearing, deep soaking, and mulching can visibly revive a stressed plant within a couple of weeks because you have finally given the roots the cool, steady, moist conditions they were starving for. The one bit of cutting I allow myself on a struggling plant in August is removing wood that is genuinely, provably dead. I scratch the bark of a questionable stem with my thumbnail. If there is green underneath, it is alive, and I leave it, buds and all. If it is brown and dry all the way through and it snaps without bending, it is dead. And taking it out sends the plant's energy to the living stems instead. That is the only pruning an established plant needs right now, and it is safe because you are removing nothing that could ever bloom. Give a tired old hydrangea clean ground, a deep drink, a cool mulch blanket, and freedom from that soft late feeding, and you will be shocked how much stronger it looks by the time the leaves turn. You are not starting over. You are bringing back what you already have. And once you have done that, Once your established plant is fed by compost and cooled by mulch and watered properly, there is one more August danger circling your hydrangea that catches even experienced gardeners off guard because it wears a disguise. It looks like thirst. It is not. Let me tell you how to read your plant correctly, because misreading it is where good gardeners go wrong. I told you earlier that a hydrangea will droop in the afternoon heat even when the soil is moist. Now, I want to make sure you never confuse the two kinds of wilt, because treating them the same way is how people accidentally kill a healthy plant with kindness. The first kind is heat wilt. It happens in the hottest part of the day, the leaves go soft and flop, and then, this is the key, the plant recovers on its own in the cool of the evening or by the next morning. If you go out at 7 in the morning and the leaves have perked back up, that was heat wilt, and the plant does not need anything from you. The soil test proves it. Damp, 2 inches down, perked up by morning, that plant is fine. Leave it alone. The second kind is true drought stress. The leaves wilt and they stay wilted even in the cool morning. The soil is dry, 2 knuckles down, and the edges of the leaves may start to brown and crisp. That plant needs a deep, slow morning soak right away. The whole secret is to check in the morning, not the afternoon, and to trust your finger in the soil over the drama of the leaves in the heat. Afternoon drooping is theater. Morning drooping is a genuine cry for help. Once you can tell the difference, you stop overwatering the healthy ones and you stop ignoring the truly thirsty ones. You water the plant that actually needs it, and you leave the tough ones to their afternoon sulk. There is one more thing that catches people here. Container hydrangeas and newly planted ones dry out far faster than established ones in the ground, sometimes needing water every single day in a real August heat wave, because a pot has so little soil to hold moisture, and it heats up on all sides. So if your hydrangea lives in a pot on the patio, check it every morning without fail, because for that plant, the rules are stricter and the margin for error is much smaller. So now you know, do not shear it in August. Do not panic water it in the afternoon. Mulch it cool, but keep the crown clear. Stop feeding it soft late growth. Read the morning, not the afternoon. Get those 5 things right, and you have already protected next year's blooms better than most gardeners on your street. But I promised you something more. I promised you the one overlooked step, the hidden this, kept alive by old cottage gardeners and pointing straight back to the science of how these plants survive the cold. And this is the one that almost everybody gets exactly backward. So let me give it to you now, because there is a narrow window to get it right, and it starts with a decision you will make in the next few weeks. Here it is. Do not cut off the faded flower heads and clean up your big leaf hydrangea for winter. Leave the spent blooms standing on the plant right through the fall and all the way through the winter, and do not remove them until spring. I know. Every tidy bone in your body wants those brown, papery, old flowers gone. They look finished. They look messy. And for generations, gardeners have been told to snip them off and neaten the plant for winter. That advice is exactly what quietly kills the buds. Remember what we said at the very beginning. Big leaf hydrangeas form next year's flower buds in late summer and carry them on the stems all through winter. Those buds, sitting near the tips of the stems, are tender. Cold is their single greatest enemy. A hard frost or a brutal winter freeze can kill those exposed buds, and a plant with dead buds gives you leaves and no flowers, no matter how perfectly you cared for it all summer. Now here is the quiet genius the old growers understood. Those faded flower heads you want to cut off act like tiny umbrellas over the buds below them. The dried bloom and the stem it sits on shelter, the vulnerable bud tucked just underneath, buffering it from the worst of the frost and the drying winter wind. Leave the old flower on, and you leave a little cap of protection over next year's flower. Cut it off in your autumn tidy up, and you strip that protection away right before the cold arrives, exposing the very buds you spent all summer trying to save. This is not a folk superstition. It lines up exactly with what Dr. Michael Deere and the university breeders learned about why big leaf hydrangeas so often fail to bloom in cold regions. It is not the roots that die over winter. It is the flower buds on the old wood that get killed by cold, and everything you can do to shelter those buds through winter is what buys you flowers in June. Leaving the dried heads and the full length of the stems standing is the simplest shelter there is, and it costs you nothing but the urge to tidy. So this is what I do now, every single year, and it has changed my hydrangeas completely. In fall, I fight the urge to clean up. I leave every spent flower head where it is. I leave the stems full length. All winter the plant looks a little wild and rustic, crowned with dried blooms, and I let it because I know what is happening underneath. Those brown papery caps are standing guard over next year's flowers through every frost. Then, and only then, when spring arrives and I see the new leaves pushing out and the danger of hard frost has passed, I go out and I finally deadhead. I cut each old flower off just above the first strong, fat, healthy pair of buds swelling on the stem. Not deeper. Just the spent head and a short bit of stem, right down to those living buds that made it through the winter safe. And those are the buds that open into the mophead blooms everyone stops to admire. Leave the heads on through winter, deadhead in spring, just above the first fat buds. That is the whole secret. It is the reverse of everything the tidy advice tells you. It is what the careful old growers quietly kept doing, and it is backed by the plain science of how these plants survive the cold. If you do only one thing differently this year, let it be this. Walk away from the pruners this fall. Let your hydrangea stand tall and shaggy and crowned with its old blooms all winter long, and wait for the spring reveal. Because in the end, this was never really about pruning schedules or watering cans or bags of fertilizer. It is about the quiet grief of watching a plant you love give you nothing but leaves, and the deep relief of finally understanding why and knowing you will never let it happen again. You are the kind of gardener who does not give up on a plant. You are the kind who kneels down, gets the soil under your nails, and figures it out because that hydrangea by your door means something. Maybe someone gave it to you. Maybe you have watched it grow for a decade. That is exactly why these small, correct, well-timed touches matter so much, and why the tidy, generic advice has cost so many people so many seasons of bloom. So tell me, which hydrangea are you going to protect first this August? Is it a big blue mop head, a soft pink lace cap, an old struggling one you have almost given up on? Write it down in the comments right now and tell me where in the world you are gardening from, because I read them and I love knowing who is out there in the beds with me. Do not just think it, type it. It helps you commit to actually doing it. And if you are the kind of gardener who refuses to lose a plant you have poured years into just because someone handed you lazy, generic advice, then come stand with the rest of us who feel the same way, because that is exactly who this little corner of the garden fence is for. I will see you in the next one, where I am going to show you the one thing you must do for your hydrangea the moment the leaves drop in autumn, the step that decides whether the color you get next summer comes out blue or pink, and how to control it on purpose. You will not want to guess at that one. Until then, put down the pruners and let those old blooms stand. Before you go, one thing. This video showed the mistakes, but inside the blooming garden circle, I walk you through that winter bud protection step, start to finish, the part I couldn't cover here. And you can ask me your own hydrangea questions, and I answer you myself, a real person. You won't be doing this alone. Just point your phone's camera at the code on screen. You can cancel anytime. I'm Mary. I'd love to see you inside. Now that you know what to avoid, let me show you how to get twice as many blooms this summer. It's simpler than you think, and it starts right here. Just stay with me.